Welcome back to another week of the Rebel's Edge. We're here at the CBOE Global Markets. Almost screwed it up. Almost.
That's all right.
Global Markets. But we are shooting live here at CBOE Global Markets and delighted that they could squeeze us in. My brother Pete and I will be back shortly with what's going on in the markets, including the negotiations over in London between the U.S. and China. All that and more on today's Rebel's Edge. Boom. Bang.
You don't have the clapper, huh?
Didn't bring the clapper, Pete. I'm going to be traveling too much over the next couple days, so I instead just decided I'd use my hands. It gets kind of banged up in the bag when I'm carrying all that stuff. But anyway, great to be with you, Pete. How was your weekend?
Great weekend watching my son at Polo Cross up in North Dakota. It was actually unbelievable. And I was up there, John, at I think it's the Teddy Roosevelt or whatever national park that's up that way. It was absolutely spectacular. I swear to you, it looks like you're in Utah or Arizona or whatever. And I'd never been there. So Dickinson, North Dakota is where we were. It was pretty cool.
Well, and Polo Cross, as opposed to the mallets that they use in hitting that hard ball, Polo Cross, they use lacrosse sticks, Pete, I guess?
Yep. Basically, you're on your horse still, but you use a lacrosse stick and ball and about the size of a big soccer field. And it's 3 against 3, and they have different rules where you can be. But once you learn the rules, it's a really fascinating sport, man. It's pretty incredible to watch, actually. The talent that these people have is off the charts.
Yeah, basically operating the horse with your thighs.
Yes.
Your inside thighs, pulling hard on one side or the other. And the horse is part of the game, right?
Oh, yeah, the horse. And you know what? Believe it or not, you want a smaller rather than a bigger horse because it gets you a little closer to the ground. So there's but it is very physical as well. Both men, women, all ages, whatever. But it's pretty cool. It's pretty wild to watch.
Well, let's dive into macro, Pete. The markets are just kind of waiting, it seems, despite all the hubbub that went on over in California, primarily over the weekend, with the president having to send in 2,000 National Guard troops and having 500 Marines on standby. That's because, if you didn't see it, folks, because a lot of media didn't cover it, they were setting Los Angeles on fire again because of the deportations. And at least one person was killed. He was standing in front of a car. He was not run over, but he snapped backwards and hit his head on the ground and dead on the spot. So, when there's that kind of stuff going on, you want to be probably somewhere else other than in front of those vehicles. But, whether they want to call it peaceful or otherwise, those protests were something I think that we were all focused on, anybody that was seeing them.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And, John, going back to last week, too, I think it sort of brings into today as well, but the payrolls, the non-farm payrolls and what that looked like and how much of a beat, because that was not expected. As a matter of fact, most people were looking for this thing to pull back a little bit, but it turned out healthcare, they basically were responsible for almost 50% of the jobs, John. So that was pretty impressive. You get 139,000 when you were actually looking for 125,000. That's a pretty big beat and pretty impressive. Markets absolutely flew to the upside on Friday. Kind of holding on right now, kind of in a pause. So it'll be interesting to see. And I think that there's a lot of different topics that we could bring up that's going to change things over the next couple hours or days or whatever. But certainly there's a lot of interest in the market right now, and we're still kind of holding on to some of those gains.
Yeah, well, I think overall, Pete, will be focused on things like the ICE deportations, as well as, of course, something positive, hopefully, out of London, which they say is getting closer and closer. So fingers crossed on this end, Pete. As far as futures, fantastic futures, I'll focus in on the 10-year, which is hovering at 4.5. Yeah. Of course, we did get down into the 4.3s this past week, but then with that strong employment number, the idea that maybe the Fed would be making a cut before Jackson Hole kind of went out the window, don't you think?
Yeah, I would say you're right. John, the fantastic futures I got for you, not surprising, it's the volatility, but the fact that we've been holding on, John, even with these big movements both up and down, mostly up, it's been pretty amazing. I mean, even today we're looking at a market where the volatility index traded on the low end, call it 1720, high end about 1770. We are still kind of looking and once in a while poke our head around that 18 level, but not very much. So interesting to watch, even with a lot of the different things that are going on news-wise. The markets are pretty steady Eddie right now, hanging around that let's call it 1750 for the VIX.
Yeah, and a lot of that, of course, Pete, because we're not seeing 1% moves really right now, and that would be a 16 VIX. Yeah. So the fact that we're at 17, I think that extra fluff is in there because of the risks of how these talks go in London. Yep. And if they go well, and if the other talks go well, we'll be seeing a VIX in the 15s in the not too distant future, Pete.
Yep, I agree.
Well, let's talk about one that kind of sounds like MicroStrategy, but it isn't. It's MTSR. And this company, Pete, they have a phase 1 clinical trial for an injectable, ultra long acting, injectable, for obesity, for treating obesity and overweight. Now, other than cancer, Pete, the most popular drugs on the planet right now tend to be these GLP-1 drugs, like Mounjaro and like Ozempic. Well, this is another competitor that's coming out. It's really well tolerated, they say. And through phase 1 trials, that doesn't mean they're ready to put it on the market, of course. But this is a pretty interesting stock, this MTSR, and obviously it's getting a nice lift out of the positive phase 1 results.
Yeah, MTSR is the company, and it's up there. It actually hit 52-week highs today, John, over $35 a share. Outrageous amount of shorts in here. I mean, outrageous. So if this thing gets going and they get a little further along, phase 1's not going to do it. But you get phase 2 or phase 3, and there's anything positive at all on that, John, I am convinced that this stock could absolutely rip to the upside, unless even with it. But if the shorts start to get nervous enough now to start covering, it won't be quite as bad. Otherwise, it's going to be ugly for the shorts, and it's going to be absolutely a short squeeze like we haven't seen in a really long time. By the way, market cap on the company is almost $3 billion. So despite the fact that they don't really have anything out there yet, John, they've got a big amount of different phase 1, 2 drugs, but that's as far as it goes. They aren't anywhere close to the end of it yet. So it'll be interesting to see how well that they're able to navigate this thing. But like you said, they use the word tolerated. I like that. It's better than safety, which is what they oftentimes will say. So the fact that people are tolerated by this one, I'm not shocked. I think they've figured out a lot of these kinds of drugs that are in the obesity world. And this is just another one just to add. I think everybody should at least put this one somewhere where they can keep an eye on the ticker, because this is a stock that could absolutely get squeezed and just start ripping to the upside on any good news in the future.
MTSR, put it on your watch list, Pete says. Yep. All right, how about Circle, Pete? Anybody that is familiar with crypto knows about USDC. It's a stable coin, which means that it's not a limited supply, like, for instance, Bitcoin, but it's blockchain related, and it is a coin that is tied to the US dollar, hence USDC. These guys came public last week, Pete, at $31 a share. It has more than 4 times that just in the last couple days. It was up 30% Friday to 107, and it was up strong today as well. So I'd say the future looks bright for stable coins, and a lot more of them want to come to market, I guess.
Yeah, these stable coins, John, I think a lot of people that, are old style traders really prefer this one over the volatility that you get in some of the other parts of the crypto world. They don't want as much volatility, but they like the idea behind it. And I think that's part of what's going on here and why they're having so much success. Like you said, $31 was the IPO price, right? I think it opened around 64. It's gotten as high today as 138. So to say that this thing has had a really, really nice IPO would be saying probably still not be correct, because it's an unbelievable IPO. The way this is moving to the upside, I find it incredibly strong. I've not seen a stock do anything quite like this in a really long time. It also makes me start to think, John, hey man, what's going on with the IPO world as well as acquisitions, which we'll talk about in a minute. I would say that the investment banks right now are doing a lot of work out there, and people probably aren't really giving all the credit that should be deserved right now. I think these investment bank companies, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Citi, Bank of America, go through the list. I think they are crushing it in this part of the world, John. And I think this is just another great example of that one with Circle.
Yeah, and the Winklevoss twins, Pete, allegedly are out there thinking about bringing Gemini, their baby, out with an IPO. So they were just out in Vegas a week ago at Bitcoin 2025. Mm-hmm. All right, so we'll switch gears a little bit from casino chips for the crypto world, because that's really what Circle is. It's a digital casino chip. Just like you have $20 chips, $50 chips, and so forth. This Circle is really that, Pete. We'll switch from that up to some weird sort of speculation, I'll call it, Pete, because of Trump's fight with Elon Musk. Because when that fight between Musk and Trump, or Trump and Musk, whichever way you want to view it, it's cooled down substantially. But, of course, Elon Musk is the only rocket in town, Pete, that can go up there and reach the International Space Station and so forth, which it did when it went up and got those astronauts. Well, a bunch of other stocks popped that probably can't quite do that. So those other companies would be like ASTS and Rocket Lab. Now, it's not just about, maybe they're going to take over for Musk. No, they're not. But space is more than just going up to the space station and so forth, and perhaps a jumping off spot to the moon and Mars. It's also satellites, and that's what those two companies are really hot on. And I think the fact that Rocket Lab, RKLB, is up 9%, and the other ASTS up 12 or more percent, and was up, I think, 35% last week, tells you a lot about what people are thinking of space right now.
Yeah, and that AST Space Mobile, John, that one's crazy. I mean, it had a big ripping run, as you mentioned, all the way up, I think, close to 39. I know 39 is a 52-week highs. Today, it's been as high as almost 36. So are they moving? They're moving pretty damn nice, and both of them are up either 8 or 9% a piece. So that part of it is definitely there. The cash burn of AST is much higher than for Rocket Lab. So I think that's, one thing that could distinguish for some people whether or not they like it or don't like it for this reason or that reason. Cash burn is really, really high for AST. But I will say this as well. The shorts, John, in these, and we follow these very closely, and we've got a great guy at Market Rebellion that does an unbelievable job. They're talking
Mr.
about
Garbaz.
Yeah, Garbaz. 18 to 20% shorts in AST, John, and 13 to 18% shorts in Rocket Short. So I would just say this, with those shorts that are out there, these things certainly could have the power to start really moving to the upside even more so. Not like 8 and 9%, but starting to move like 20% potentially, if things start to go that much better for them in this industry, which I think there's a possibility that could happen. These things could really start getting that squeeze. We got to check in with Garbaz about that.
Well, and like when we're talking about, again, one's able to reach the sort of levels that the Falcon 10 and so forth can go to. That's, of course, Elon Musk's SpaceX rocket. We're not talking about apples to apples. It's apples to oranges. But there's room for other companies to be launching satellites and so forth. That's what those two really are focused on, I think, Pete. And there'll be a lot more of it. Just I don't think that move out of Galaxy, which is, of course, the British dude, Pete. I forget his name now. But that's his supposed space company. And I don't think that's a space company at all. It's just a high-flying jet, really. But anyway, all right, Galaxy Digital or whatever it is. Anyway, let's talk about what went on in Qualcomm, because they've agreed to buy a London-listed semiconductor company called Alpha Wave IP Group. So because it's got the IP in there, I bet you guys can guess what Alpha Wave does, even if you've never heard of them, right, Pete?
Yeah, I would say so. You know, John, it's really interesting because Qualcomm, they seem like they're doing everything right, but the one problem is they needed to expand, what exactly they are. And I think this is exactly what they needed to do in this acquisition. It's only $2.4 billion, John. I actually am not even joking when I say only, because when you look at that industry and the strength that we talk about every time we bring up AI and the chips and this and that and everything else, you go to NVIDIA, you go to an AMD, you go to all these things, and you look at huge numbers there. Well, I think this is a strong acquisition to really get the portfolio out there for Qualcomm, where it's not just something that's more on the smartphone side. They're getting themselves into a position with AI. And I think this is a really, really smart move between the data centers and the AI applications that come along with it. I think this is going to be a home run for them into the future. And that's been the problem. Everybody says, well, why isn't Qualcomm doing this? Why aren't they doing that? Well, because they haven't really been there. They haven't been where the fire is going, and that is where the fire is going. And now they are, John. They're going to be in there in a big way. I think this is going to be an absolute home run of an acquisition. And again, it brings us right back to those investment banks, right? People that didn't understand this at the beginning of the year, it started with earnings. It's not just about earnings. It's also about the IPO market. It's also about the acquisition market. And that is on fire right now, and nobody seems to want to talk about it.
Well, and it's one of those situations also, Pete, that you and I note from time to time. Doesn't happen all the time. In fact, it's rather rare that a company acquiring another company goes up. But this one's up better than 3%. That's a $5 move to the upside for Qualcomm on a spend of $2.5 billion. So interesting. And I guess the markets are saying it's a good move by Qualcomm. All right. Well, much as I'd like to talk about Angel Reese and so forth, Pete, with some of those funny videos, she finally, on the 8th game of the year, finally made her first shot. Because those guys had made over $1 million betting on her missing her first shot. And in the first 7 games, they were right. Well, she finally made her first shot. It was a breakaway, and she laid it up off the glass, and it actually went in, which is very rare for her, because just the other day, she only scored, I think it was either 2 or 4 points, Pete.
I think it was 4.
And she had a bunch of me bounds, which are rebounds of her own shots. The league refers to those as me bounds. Anyway, let's dive into your sports, Pete, without any more Angel Reese talk.
All right, well,
she's in the news a lot.
We will speak about the NBA, though, so we're sticking with basketball as that lead-in comes in there. So year over year, John, you start looking at these numbers, right? And you try to figure out what's accurate, what's not. You know, they talked about in the NBA that, wow, our ratings are really looking pretty good. Well, if you dig down into it, John, that's actually probably not true. And by the way, the NBA ratings are down 48% over the last 12 years, just to give you a little perspective of how bad things have gone. And I put it right on, and I'm on them all the time. I don't understand, if I'm an owner of a team in the NBA right now, if I'm Cuban or somebody, don't I want to go to them and go, hey, man, what are you doing so wrong that this league has turned to crap? And it really has turned to crap. I mean, when you look around and you look at what his solving thing is, John? He paints the floors. He doesn't do it himself, but he has these guys painting the floors, all these ridiculous colors and everything else, just to kind of change it up a little bit, rather than saying, hey, look, guys, this different managements of your body and everything else that you're doing is kind of killing the game. We got to come to an end to this whole thing, right? I mean, that's been a bit of a problem as well. But the load management thing is just one of the many problems. By the way, they had the least number of people watching a Game 1 finals since 1988. So, that says a lot, right, about what's going on and why the NBA is struggling the way they are. Now, they did get this contract, last year or whatever that kicks in this coming year. But you know what? If I'm ESPN, do I want to figure out a way to get the hell out of this contract? Because if these numbers are going to stay what they are, John, it's really getting pretty pathetic for what's going on there. So I'm just curious, where do you stand on this one? By the way, in that game one that did pop a little bit when Tyrese Halliburton actually shot the last shot. People came just to watch the very end, so it went up from like 8.9 to 11 million people or whatever watching it. But other than that, it's really gotten awful, and it's only going to probably get worse, especially if Oklahoma City plays like they usually do, which is beat people by 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 points. I think it could get ugly if they get to that point.
Yeah, sure could. Obviously, the Pacers winning the first game. Then, of course, in OKC, they came back and won the second game. So, it's 1-1. I'm sure that the league would rather that it goes 1-1, 2-1, 2-2, 3-3, and try to build a little confidence in people deciding, yeah, it's interesting, even though I don't know who the players are, except for Halliburton. Yeah. But I think there's going to be a real struggle, Pete, and we've talked about it. You talked about it 3 years ago with this load management. If you pay what you have to pay for an NBA ticket and the stars aren't out there, they shouldn't get paid. If they're not hurt, they should not get paid. Right. And if Silver doesn't figure that out, then they'll keep doing this, and people will keep saying, I don't even care, because they want $800 for a ticket, and I'm not going to even see the guys that I want to see. Forget it.
If I'm ESPN, I think I would have a meeting with him right now and start to bring all this up to him and say, hey, look, man, are you ever going to step out of this wussy cake that you are to actually make this actual competition? And these guys actually have to play games as opposed to sitting out whenever the hell they want. I mean, I can't imagine, John, if I lived up in North Dakota, I drive to a Timberwolves game and I get there and the player I wanted to see, maybe it's LeBron James, isn't playing. Am I pretty pissed off? I mean, not only is it a 4 or 5 hour drive from Fargo, but I get there and the guy's not playing. So I'm losing money the whole way. I had the gas money, number one, because it's a pretty good drive. Then I got to probably stay in a hotel. I got to buy those tickets, even the least expensive tickets. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. And it's not a very good way to treat your fans, in my opinion. All right. Speaking of treating the fans, how about this? Aaron Rodgers finally decided to sign with the football team in the NFL, not the UFL, the NFL. And it's going to be interesting, John, and I'm curious what you think about this, because we all know Tomlin is a great coach. The one issue that he's had most of his career, he's had quarterbacks here and there, but most of his career, as good as he is, he hasn't had a quarterback. He hasn't had one for a while, that's for sure. So Aaron Rodgers signing with Pittsburgh, I think DK Metcalf was a great signing, and I think that was in prep to try to go out and get Aaron Rodgers, to get a guy who can throw him the ball. As bad as people want to say Aaron played last year, John, I was taking a look at it. What about this?
No, not bad.
He's number 8 in yards. He threw for 3,900 yards, and that actually comes along with the fact that he got sacked 40 times. He was one of the most sacked quarterbacks last year, so he doesn't have a great defense. He's got a good defense. I wouldn't put him in the great category, even though some of their numbers look okay. But, you look at that side of it, and then you look at his offensive line and everything else. I think he's going to be in a much different spot. They have a great defense in Pittsburgh. They always do. He's got a big offensive line. He's got some receivers. He's got a boatload of running backs out there, John. So it's kind of setting up for an Aaron Rodgers kind of an offense, I think, better than it did when it was with the Jets. So 63% completion last year, not so bad. I think there's a lot of reasons why this really does make sense. And it doesn't mean these guys are going deep into the playoffs, because let's be honest, they are in a tough division. I mean, you've got teams like Buffalo and Baltimore. I mean, it's not like this is going to be a cakewalk by any stretch, but I think it gives Pittsburgh an opportunity to at least challenge some of these teams as we get into this year. How do you think about this, Aaron? Did he make the right decision?
Yep, absolutely made the right decision. Some people were saying, well, what about New Orleans? No. DK Metcalf, Pete, makes it a no-brainer for him to go there. Now, if DK got hurt, that would be a big, negative, of course, because we're all counting on him, and they traded their troublesome wide receiver that was hugely talented, but troublesome. They got rid of him. Mm-hmm. So DK, that big horse is going to love having Aaron Rodgers deliver him the ball. And by the way, I've been watching your quarterback up in Minnesota, JJ McCarthy, and there's a lot of people around the league that say he looks like a young Aaron Rodgers, Pete, because the tight spiral that he throws and the little space, basically like a mailbox that he can put the ball into that space. He looks really, really good. And he might be the guy that has even better receivers, and the combination of his new O-line with those great receivers. I think J.J. McCarthy's going to be lighting it up. But, yeah, I'm glad Aaron finally signed, and he needs to get in there and get some reps with DK for sure, Pete.
Yeah, and I'd say one last thing. I'd say you're right about J.J. McCarthy. I mean, the kid was great. He's from LaGrange, Illinois. He grew up right where I lived for a long time, John. Great player, IMG, great player, college, great player, and now at the professional level, I think, if you look at this kid's resume, John, it's stunning. I mean, he doesn't lose games. He plays at a high level in almost every game he's ever played in. I mean, he's just that kind of a guy. And he does have a lot of an Aaron Rodgers to him because he's not a big guy. He's not the 6'5", 235-pound guy, like a lot of those NFL quarterbacks. But he's mobile when he needs to be, and I think he's going to be very careful because of his knee last year. But I think this kid is going to be a superstar in the NFL. I really do. He has some throws that you see on Twitter where you're just watching it going, wow, man, that's a tight spiral this guy throws, and he puts it in the one spot that the receiver can get it. So he's pretty special. I know he hasn't thrown an NFL pass yet, at least not in real season, but he's going to be a monster for the Vikings, I think.
Yep, you're lucky to have him, and thank goodness the surgery went well. Yeah. They got so much better at that meniscus tear surgery that I think he'll be just fine. Well, thanks for joining us, folks. Remember, you can always check out marketrebellion.com / that goes like that, / get started for financial literacy, a lot of free, basically basic options and even intermediate options, strategies, and so forth. And then if you are of a mind to, you can subscribe to the education and or the signals that we do. You can do all that at marketrebellion.com / get started. And we'll see Pete and John tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you, by the way, to SIBO Global Markets for letting us shoot here again.
Awesome.